Today, Google Maps tells you when to turn, how long the journey should take, and whether traffic or a closure is waiting ahead. A medieval traveler carried no GPS, street address, or detailed personal map. Pilgrims still crossed kingdoms, merchants moved between distant cities, royal messengers covered hundreds of miles, sailors linked ports across the Mediterranean and the North Sea. Roads, landmarks, spoken directions, guides, written itineraries, and constant questions kept them moving. That system carried an obvious weakness. How could travelers tell whether they were still heading the right way? What happened when the person giving directions had remembered badly? The first thing to understand is that medieval travelers usually imagined a journey differently from a navigation app. A modern app calculates one complete route between your exact position and the final destination. Medieval journeys were more often divided into smaller stages. To travel from London to Canterbury, you did not need every road stored in your head. You needed the correct city gate, the road toward the next settlement, the usable river crossing, and a place where someone could give you the next set of instructions. Directions relied on landmarks large enough to recognize: a bridge, church tower, market town, castle, river, hill, forest edge, shrine, or stone cross at a junction. A traveler might be told, "Follow this road to the stone bridge. Keep the river on your left. Once you reach the next town, ask for the road onward." Modern ears hear uncertainty in those instructions. They worked because the destination was usually a town, monastery, port, fortress, or major crossing, rather than one doorway hidden among hundreds of nearly identical buildings. The route existed as a sequence of visible places. Nobody had to understand the whole journey alone. A villager knew the roads around his own fields. A ferryman knew the crossings. An innkeeper heard daily reports from travelers. Merchants remembered the roads between markets. Monks could name religious houses offering shelter farther ahead. Knowledge was spread across many people. Google Maps stores millions of roads inside one digital system. Medieval travelers moved through thousands of small human maps, each covering one familiar patch of ground. Questions were constant. Travelers stopped guards, priests, farmers, boatmen, innkeepers, and other people on the road. On entering a new region, a cautious traveler might confirm the same direction several times. Asking was part of preparation rather than evidence that preparation had failed. The system still depended on roads connecting the necessary places, and medieval Europe contained far more routes than the usual image suggests. Some followed roads with Roman origins, although centuries of weather, repair, neglect, and local alteration could leave them looking very different from the original construction. Others developed around medieval priorities: monasteries, markets, ports, mines, castles, farms, and growing towns. No single authority maintained one uniform road system across Europe. A route might be well repaired near a rich town, rough across farmland, and barely visible inside woodland. The word road covered a wide range of surfaces. Near a city gate, it could mean paving. Between villages, packed earth. Elsewhere, a narrow track for pack animals, a raised path over wet ground, or two deep wheel ruts full of mud. A route usable in July might become almost impassable after several days of rain. A navigation app tells you that your destination is 20 miles away. Medieval travelers usually needed answers to more immediate questions. Was the bridge intact? Had the river risen? Could a loaded wagon pass? When did the town gate close? Was there lodging ahead? Had soldiers occupied the road? Were thieves working nearby? The shortest route often carried the greatest inconvenience or danger. A person on foot could use tracks too narrow for a cart. A rider moved faster while the horse remained sound. Merchants transporting heavy goods often chose longer roads with reliable bridges. A noble household burdened with wagons, servants, bedding, chests, and supplies moved far more slowly than one mounted courier. Every journey moved at the pace of its slowest part. That might be a horse, cart, broken wheel, sick companion, flooded ford, or nobleman traveling with enough luggage to frighten a modern airport baggage clerk. Under ordinary conditions, 15 to 20 miles in a day could be a reasonable result, although terrain and weather changed everything. A royal messenger using fresh horses might cover far more. A cart convoy could cover much less. Travel was usually measured in days and stopping points rather than exact arrival times. A route could be described as 2 days to one town, another day to a river crossing, and 3 more to a major city. Time and lodging were tied together. That made accommodation part of navigation. An inn offered more than food and sleep. It was a place where news about the road collected. The innkeeper might know that a bridge had failed, the ferry had stopped running, or soldiers had passed through recently. Religious institutions also formed part of the route. Depending on the house and the traveler, monasteries, hospitals, and other foundations connected to pilgrimage roads could offer shelter, meals, treatment, or a place to rest. A medieval hospital did not necessarily resemble a modern medical center. Many were charitable religious houses serving pilgrims, poor people, the elderly, or the sick. Some supplied beds and meals, others had more specialized purposes. Travelers planned around places where assistance was available, as well as the roads between them. Pilgrimage made the entire system especially visible. Medieval Christians traveled toward nearby shrines, great cathedrals, Rome, Jerusalem, Canterbury, and Santiago de Compostela. Such journeys crossed political borders, language regions, mountain ranges, and seas. Pilgrims traveled under very different conditions. A rich pilgrim might bring horses, servants, money, good equipment, and letters of introduction. A poorer pilgrim often walked with a staff and depended heavily on hospitality. Both benefited from routes already used by others. Popular pilgrimage roads attracted ferries, bridges, inns, hospitals, churches, guides, and more pilgrims. Repetition made the road easier to recognize and support. Clothing and badges could identify a pilgrim's purpose. The scallop shell became strongly associated with Santiago, while other shrines sold their own tokens. These badges functioned differently from passports, though they could help travelers recognize companions moving toward the same destination. Following other people was often useful near a famous shrine. A group wearing the same badge and walking toward the next town offered better guidance than one lonely track vanishing across a field. Some written guides survived, although most travelers never owned or read one. The 12th century work associated with the Codex Calixtinus described routes towards Santiago de Compostela. It discussed regions, rivers, settlements, shrines, and dangers along the way. This was no cheap guidebook stacked beside every roadside stall. Manuscripts required expensive materials and labor, while literacy remained limited. Many pilgrims never saw the text directly. Its information could still spread orally. Clergy, guides, experienced pilgrims, and hosts repeated useful details. One manuscript might support hundreds of spoken journeys. Modern travelers usually look at the route themselves. During the Middle Ages, one literate person could pass pieces of a journey to many others. Written itineraries were often more practical than large maps. An itinerary listed locations in the order a traveler would encounter them. Towns, rivers, distances, and stopping points formed a route suited to actual movement. A map showing the shape of an entire kingdom could be impressive. A list explaining which town followed the next bridge might help more on the road. Matthew Paris, a 13th century English monk, produced an illustrated journey from London toward the Holy Land. Places, landmarks, and movement unfold across a series of pages. It neither looks nor behaves exactly like a modern road map. Its purpose was to divide an enormous journey into understandable stages. Thinking in stages also limited the damage caused by small mistakes. A wrong turning near a village could be corrected at the next farm, field, or crossroads. Travelers did not always continue for 100 miles before noticing the problem. Frequent confirmation kept the route together. Spoken directions still depended on memory, language, and local assumptions. Place names shifted between dialects and languages. Nearby villages could have similar names. A local person might describe the road using a landmark obvious to everyone nearby and meaningless to an outsider. Take the old road beyond the ruined mill helps only when everybody agrees which ruined mill is meant. Distance could also be misleading. A local resident who had walked a route for 20 years might describe it as close. The same route could feel very different to a stranger carrying a heavy bag through rain. Some people simply gave poor directions. Careful medieval travelers responded much as cautious travelers do today. They compared answers, retraced their steps, waited for another group, or paid somebody to guide them. Guides became especially valuable in difficult terrain. Snow changed mountain passes. Marshes concealed stable paths. Tidal crossings were safe at certain hours and deadly at others. Forests contained tracks created by hunters, woodcutters, herders, and travelers going in completely different directions. A skilled guide knew more than the compass direction. Timing, water sources, tolls, current road conditions, and nearby dangers all formed part of the service. Navigation could therefore become paid labor. A traveler approaching a difficult pass might hire someone from the area. A merchant entering a strange city relied on local contacts. Ships employed pilots familiar with particular harbors, channels, and shoals. Google Maps tells you where a road is supposed to run. A local guide knew whether it had washed away that morning. Political borders created another layer of difficulty. Medieval Europe consisted of kingdoms, cities, principalities, bishoprics, lordships, and territories with overlapping claims. One road might cross several jurisdictions in a surprisingly short distance. Tolls could appear at roads, bridges, gates, rivers, and markets. Travelers might be questioned, searched, delayed, or required to identify themselves. Officials, royal envoys, and merchants sometimes carried letters of safe conduct asking authorities to allow them to pass, travel, or trade without interference. Such documents worked only when local officials respected the power behind them. During war, yesterday's protection could become today's suspicious parchment. Political calculation formed part of route planning. Merchants might avoid a direct road because one lord charged punishing tolls. Pilgrims could prefer routes with more religious houses. Envoys often chose friendly territory rather than risk capture. Modern navigation offers an option to avoid toll roads. Medieval travelers sometimes avoided toll collectors, armed patrols, and an entire disputed county. Groups provided safety and knowledge. Pilgrims found companions. Merchants traveled together or hired guards. Nobles brought armed retainers and servants. A group could share provisions, care for horses, repair equipment, witness disputes, and discourage opportunistic thieves. Several travelers also carried more information than one. One recognized the road. Another spoke the local dialect. Someone had visited the next town. A merchant remembered the toll. A priest knew the monastery. The group became a moving navigation system, although a large and expensive one. 20 travelers with animals could hardly enter an inn quietly at sunset. Maps certainly existed, though most were created for purposes other than guiding an ordinary person through each road junction. Large world maps combine geography with history, religion, politics, and legend. Jerusalem might occupy the center. Biblical scenes and distant peoples could share the same surface. Such maps reveal how educated medieval people understood the world. They rarely functioned as practical road tools. Trying to use one to find the correct gate would resemble using a classroom map of the United States to locate the entrance to a parking garage. More practical mapping developed, especially in the later Middle Ages. The Goff map, produced around the late 14th or early 15th century, shows Britain with rivers, settlements, and lines connecting routes. Scholars continue debating its exact purpose, but it demonstrates that mapmakers could represent a large transportation network visually. Access remained narrow. Manuscript maps demanded money, materials, and highly trained labor. Institutions, scholars, administrators, and wealthy owners were far more likely to possess them. Most travelers carried none. The sea presented another kind of navigational problem because no visible road crossed the water. Sailors used shorelines, islands, headlands, winds, currents, stars, sunlight, water depth, and generations of accumulated experience. They remembered how landmarks aligned and recognized the shape of harbor entrances and dangerous shallows. Where possible, ships remained within sight of land. Local pilots were valuable because approaching a harbor could be more dangerous than crossing open water. They understood channels, tides, rocks, and sandbanks invisible to outsiders. By the later Middle Ages, magnetic compasses and portolan charts had become important tools in Mediterranean navigation. Portolan charts emphasized shorelines, ports, and webs of directional lines. For sailors, they offered far more practical detail than most earlier world maps. A chart still could not sail the vessel. Crews estimated direction and speed. Wind pushed ships away from their planned course. Clouds hid the sky. Storms overturned careful calculations. A compass supplied direction without guaranteeing arrival. Medieval sailors combined instruments with experience, a process much closer to professional navigation than blindly following an arrow on a screen. Rivers and sea routes could move people and heavy goods more cheaply and quickly than roads. Grain, wine, wool, salt, timber, stone, and many other cargoes traveled through ports and waterways. One journey might combine walking, riding, ferries, riverboats, and ships. There was no single medieval transport system. Several systems joined together. A merchant could travel by road to a river settlement, continue downstream by boat, then board a sea-going vessel at the coast. Different specialists controlled each stage. Boatmen knew the river. Harbor officials understood the port. Sailors knew the coastline. Local merchants knew the streets. Long journeys succeeded because travelers repeatedly passed from one network of knowledge into another. That is how exceptional travelers crossed astonishing distances. Marco Polo reached Asia without a secret, flawless map. Ibn Battuta did not travel through much of the Islamic world and beyond by choosing one direction and following it for decades. They relied on ships, trade routes, caravans, guides, religious communities, interpreters, courts, hosts, and political relationships. Their journeys were extraordinary. The network supporting them came from ordinary travel repeated over generations. Merchants had already linked cities. Pilgrims had created demand for lodging. Governments regularly dispatched messengers. Sailors had learned the ports and seasonal winds. Famous travelers moved through systems built because thousands of less famous people also needed to go somewhere. This corrects one of the largest myths about medieval travel. Leaving a village did not always mean stepping into empty wilderness. Much of medieval Europe and the Mediterranean world was cultivated, inhabited, traded through, taxed, and regularly crossed. Roads could still be dangerous, poorly marked, or damaged. The landscape nevertheless contained clues. Fields pointed towards settlement, smoke marked houses, church towers identified towns, wheel tracks showed regular traffic, bridges and ferries concentrated movement into recognizable places. Travelers learned to read those signs. There was no single response to becoming lost. A traveler could return to the last familiar place, follow a river towards settlement, wait for another group, climb higher to look for a tower, ask workers in the fields, hire a guide, or accept that one mistake had consumed an entire day. Getting lost could become dangerous in severe weather or hostile territory. Many wrong turns ended with frustration rather than catastrophe. Sometimes the traveler reached the wrong village and listened while several residents explained that the last person had given terrible directions. A largely invisible workforce kept routes usable. Somebody repaired the bridge, operated the ferry, cleared fallen trees, guarded city gates, fed horses, repaired wheels, made shoes, provided beds, copied letters, and led strangers across difficult ground. The traveler saw the road. A broad service system stood behind it. Modern navigation still depends on hidden labor maintaining roads, satellites, traffic reports, and map databases. The screen simply keeps most of those workers out of sight. Medieval travelers met them directly. That helps explain why so much ordinary navigation has disappeared from the historical record. Spoken directions left no document. Wooden markers rotted. Paths shifted across fields. Bridges were rebuilt. Simple tools and travel bags wore out. A farmer who redirected one lost pilgrim rarely recorded the conversation. Documents preserve royal journeys, wars, taxes, official messages, and property more readily than a question asked beside a muddy road. The evidence is therefore uneven. It includes itineraries, maps, pilgrimage texts, letters, accounts, bridges, legal records, buildings, and travel narratives. The exact conversation that carried an unknown traveler to the next town is usually gone. The broad answer remains clear. Medieval travelers crossed great distances by dividing them into shorter stages. They followed roads, coastlines, rivers, shrines, markets, ports, castles, and towns. Landmarks guided them. Sequences were memorized. Directions were requested again and again. Guides helped through difficult ground. Groups offered knowledge and protection. Itineraries, letters, monasteries, inns, hospitals, bridges, ferries, and hospitality connected one stage to the next. Some people used maps. Most could reconstruct the route without possessing a complete one. Their system delivered less precision than Google Maps, updated more slowly, and depended heavily on trust. It carried one useful advantage. The person giving directions might know exactly which bridge had collapsed, where the road had turned to mud, and which inn still had safe beds. A modern traveler can cross an entire country while speaking to almost nobody. A medieval traveler crossed it through one conversation after another. When a pilgrim reached a fork, the whole journey did not rest on one decision made in isolation. He looked for traffic, followed the tower, reached the next settlement, and consulted the most useful navigation tool available, someone who had already traveled the road.